It's 3:30. Live. Yep.
We are live. Do we have anybody for comment on there? You know?
No.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call the meeting to order at 3:30. As of this time, we do not have Councilmember Brown. We haven't heard anything from Councilmember Brown, so I would assume he is still going to show, but at this time, he is not here. With that being said, we are to the August 28th meeting minutes. Councilman Garza.
I wasn't here. I'm not allowed to approve.
Oh, you're right. Okay. So for now, we're still to the side. All right, it takes us to public comment on agenda items. I don't believe that we have anybody outside of maybe Joan, and I think you're here for a very specific agenda item, correct? So, I mean, if you want to address the committee now, otherwise, my understanding is you were pretty heavily involved with what is on the agenda, so maybe we'll just bring it to the table. Is that okay?
It is, thank you.
Not a problem.
I'm mostly here actually to just observe and to listen.
Okay.
I work with the shared use housing advocacy group that formed about a year ago.
Right.
Interested in those forms of shared use housing, boarding houses, rooming houses, co-ops, ADUs, cottage developments that might gently densify our neighborhoods, you know, help along with many other strategies to address the housing crisis. We worked really closely with the planning department and have kind of monitored the progress of the proposals of resolutions C and D through the city's internal audit, through the planning commission more recently. And we're really delighted it's arrived at council, and we're looking forward to engaging with council members about the issue. So thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Seeing no other public comment, we're going to move on down to 5, discussion action item B. This is the resolution to set a public hearing on amending chapter 1236, design standards for parcel dimensions. Andy, I would assume you're going to start.
Yes. I'll try to be brief and also comprehensive. It might take a little second to wrap your heads around it, but basically this stems from a state act from 1967 and city ordinance that followed in 1968 that set parcel width and parcel depth as well as parcel width to depth ratio. So in state law, it says that no parcel can be more than 4 times longer than the width. They also let cities adopt more restrictive regulations if they want. And I can't speak to why, but Lansing decided on a 2.5 ratio. So no parcel can be more than 2.5 times longer than the width. This has caused issues when people are trying to split their land. Lansing mostly has been subdivided and developed since that time. So any creation of new parcels are usually through lot splits. So what happens is usually people want less than 60 feet wide, or they want deeper than the 2.5 times 1 ratio.
When you say people want less than, are these typically people that are looking to buy, or I'm sorry, actually build like homeowner occupied type residences?
So recently,
investors that come in and want to build, you know, as much density as possible to make as much possible in terms of ROI. I mean, what are you saying when you talk about these little lots?
Usually it's small scale developers and they're local. It's been Ingham County Land Bank. It's been Ray Garcia. I forget his business name, but he's been in front of you a few times. Yeah. And so it's still single family lots, but it makes a little more sense to have maybe 2 single family houses built at the same time rather than 1 house. It's just how the numbers work for them. So it's been small scale people. I don't think there's been anyone from out of town who's come. But so to grant those variances, they have to go first through Planning Commission and then through City Council. City Council has heard 5 through 2022 and 2023. But going back in the 70s and 80s, there was dozens per year. There's a lot. So we just kind of looked at this one as one that we could reduce barriers. Right now it's stalling a capital area housing partnership development plan for 6 new single family houses directly across from the Neighborhood Empowerment Center. And then, as I mentioned, Land Bank and Ray Garcia also run into this. So we're just trying to reduce some red tape and reduce some of the barrier to development. when we have noticed these variance requests, we do prepare a staff report. And by and large, we notice that they conform with the parcels surrounding them. I believe in your packet, there was a 3-page little handout. And on that second page, there was a map that showed 21 surrounding parcels matched what they were proposing, and that's very normal. So we're not trying to, cram in as many lots as possible. We still want to protect the neighborhood character and the development pattern. This just kind of makes it a little easier to do that, accomplish that goal.
Would this allow still for like a yard for, the family that lives there to actually enjoy?
Absolutely, they'd still have their setbacks. And most of the time they will have bigger yards. So for that example, that ratio is 1 to 4.6 or something like that. So they still have quite big yards. They just won't have the massive yards for, if the lot was not allowed to be subdivided.
You have other questions? Do
Not right at this time.
you have anything else?
Nope, just with this, staff consulted with a land use professor from MSU Extension as well as the OCA office. So we did try to vet this and make sure that we were doing this correctly.
Raleigh, what are your thoughts?
I like it.
Yeah.
What Andy said. No, but in general, I think this further supports our ability to offer some diversity in the type of housing options for some of these parcels across the city, as Andy mentioned, land bank, haven't tried to address, but this is now a roadblock. And so, certainly the one that sticks out to me that I'm most familiar with is the parcel across from the neighborhood apartment center that Mid-Michigan Leadership Academy has. It's fenced in, and this is a great opportunity. There's already 4 houses adjacent that, this would continue forward, but this type of roadblock prohibits that type of development.
So you're saying that the homes adjacent to our lots that receive variances, so they're smaller lots?
Represent they receive variance in the past, but it's that these types of development, having this resolved.
They're smaller lots, that's what I'm asking.
Correct.
Got it.
Are existing. We just have and this is going to be for the other 2 items too, just a formality question on how you would like to proceed forward with presentations. You'll be, if voted out today, will be on your agenda, I believe, on the 23rd to set a public hearing. And so the question we'll have is, would you prefer we attend that Monday meeting to give a more formal presentation to your other colleagues? Or would you rather we wait until the evening of the public hearing?
No. So what we do out of this committee, so you're correct, at the very earliest, I'm not certain if this is going to move out sure day or not. The very earliest, yes, we could introduce a set on the 23rd. That would be for October 14th. Again, that's the very earliest. What we would want is you to be there. Let's say we do it the 23rd. Sure, that night.
Okay.
Right. I don't know that it gives. I don't know if there's a lot of value having a presentation the night of the public hearing. Right. Just there's no other questions. I read through the whole thing. I mean, I understand it. Whether or not I support it down the line, I want to see what the public input is. So obviously, I think it's certainly appropriate to move forward for a potential public hearing. So again, what we would be looking at doing, we would have to fill in the dates in terms of the resolution, but introduction and in terms of from the full body would happen at the 23rd, around the 23rd if we move it out today. And the public hearing would be October 14th. Councilman Garza, what's your interest?
Well, I definitely would like to learn a little bit more about it. I'm interested for sure. And with that, I'd make a motion.
Or for the discussion, seeing and hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Fantastic. And then Joan, if you want to come up for the next 2, where you said you were involved, supposed to see Andy. Joan, you can sit at the table if you like. You don't want to be part of the conversation, that's fine. So Andy, if you want to, Andy or Raleigh, I don't know who's going to take the lead on this, but this is a resolution to set a public hearing to amend Part 12, Title 6, form-based zoning code. Second amendment.
So this is a second amendment to the zoning ordinance. It was first voted on in March and then enacted in May 2021. Shortly after, we realized there were some kinks and some technical errors that we needed to clear up. So we did a first amendment that summer and took effect January 2022. Staff constantly reviews the zoning ordinance based on feedback from developers, residents, as well as code enforcement in our own departments. And we now it's kind of come to a critical mass of where we think we can introduce a second amendment. We seek to identify opportunities for competitive advantage in the metro region. That's where a lot of these tweaks come from. So we can simplify our number of zoning districts. We're proposing to merge a few of them where there weren't really any big differences between them. Just as an aside for that, the ones that we are merging, they won't affect the marijuana ordinance. Those districts will still be in play as a location-wise, so that won't affect anything there. We've also took a look at the allowable use table. We've introduced we're proposing to introduce a few housing concepts, or at least give them new regulations for cooperatives and cottage courts. That's kind of the overview. There is quite a bit in there. So we can
There's
be
a whole lot in here. So why don't you start taking us through it? I'm not going to support moving this out of committee for a public hearing until I fully understand. So
Sure.
you want to take us through it? And if it takes a few meetings, that's just fine.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So just getting to the districts, we want to simplify them. There's 6 single-family residential districts, and there's no real difference between any of them. So we're proposing to condense them into 2, really. One will be for the kind of core central neighborhoods, and they would have like a minimum of 40 feet lot width. That's pretty standard. They're usually 33 to 40 feet. And then for the outlying areas, that's a district R2, which would have a minimum 50-foot parcel width. And that kind of goes back into that the previous agenda item. If we're doing lot splits, we want to make sure that we're still maintaining the character development. You know, every parcel is the same width. Getting into industrial, there was 3 different industrial districts that really didn't have much difference between them. So we proposed to combine them. Same with institutional. But getting into the allowable use table, when we look at because this is a hybrid code, it's not just form-based. We don't care just what the building looks like. We also care what happens and how do we alleviate or control for nuisances or possible nuisances. So for just one example, we are proposing to address some of the vacancies along commercial corridors. We're proposing to allow some light industrial, but with that, we want to make sure that we have language in there that controls any nuisance for dust, noise, vibration, odors. So that language is in there. Just for an example, for the 340 West Edgewood, the old Sam's Club on the south side, we had I think a pretty serious inquiry for a person who manufactures recyclable packaging material. I think they were from St. John's and they were looking to expand and they love that site. But since we didn't allow small manufacturing, we couldn't look into that site for them. So I think they moved on to somewhere else in the metro region. We're also looking at any manufacturing that has retail sales that actually sell something to the customer in the store. That might be allowed in, or that would be allowed in commercial districts as proposed. We're proposing stronger nuisance control measures for motor vehicle businesses, thereby limiting storage and so inside the building, so they're not storing junk all over the parking lot. This just kind of tightens up that language.
I got a question. Does regarding like the car lots or whatever that have too many vehicles, it's not going to address the on-street parking of those businesses?
But we just address screening, really. But if there are junk vehicles, those would have to be, depending on if they're an industrial, they have to be in the rear yard, fenced in, screened.
I just wish there was something that could be done about some of the car lots that have obviously maximized their car lot and now they're parking down the street and interrupting, the residential areas.
So, yeah, I completely agree. And that is, sorry if you had something. One that we've breached with the police department because they'd be the ones to tow those and they just don't give it the time of day. I think of one particularly on Michigan Avenue near where I live. That's a huge nuisance. And we complain about that one quite often and nothing really gets done about it.
I was going to say the necessary tools are in the toolbox for that. We just haven't been. Yeah. All right.
I agree that is
Sorry, go ahead.
an issue.
Huge.
And with that, just making sure that those vehicles or any kind of junk materials are stored inside a building. but also control for excessive noise, dust, and fumes, like I mentioned a little bit before. Another one is we've been seeing proposals for self-storage as an accessory. So you might know that self-storage facilities are usually a special land use in the suburban commercial corridor district. People have been getting a little cute with it and thinking that as long as they have 50% something else like retail sales or commercial or whatever, they could still do self-storage. We're introducing, staff wasn't particularly against that idea, but we wanted to make sure that we had very strong controls on that. So if we did allow it, wouldn't be able to exceed 50% of that gross floor area. No storage facilities could be in the front of the building. Absolutely no on the exterior, so no storage pods or anything like that. So that's a new thing that we propose.
So is that, yeah, and was that born from some of the issues we're seeing on South MLK? Is that the one we're thinking about?
That's
Because that
one.
to me is like exactly what you are.
Yep, that is one. Another one is actually in Lansing Township,
Okay.
but at 127 in Michigan Avenue, right where the city ends and the township begins for a second,
Right.
the old Dean Transportation, or not Dean, Michigan Flyer, they sold it to a developer and they were proposing, I think like 75% self-storage and 25% residential. So that was one that we're like, well, why don't we try to head that off if that ever happens here? So that's kind of where that thought comes from. Getting into residential, there was a request from the Spartan Housing Cooperative. They're mostly in East Lansing, but they do have 2 houses in Lansing. And they made a request of how can we maybe address their expansion in the city. We won't really allow that because they're limited by the definition for functional family or housekeeping unit. So we wrote regulations to allow for cooperatives, but only in the multifamily districts in DT1. That's the downtown residential district, so not single family districts, as well as cottage courts, where that would be a collection of 3 or 6 dwellings on the same lot. Again, just multifamily or DT1, not the single family, because it's just not the development pattern that's there. So to protect the established character. Getting into the code enforcement side of that, they come to us all the time for things that people get pretty inventive with what they do with their lots. One has been illegal camping. So if they're on public property, that's a whole separate issue. But there's been a few where they've gone onto industrial property. The industrial property owner is either out of town or they don't care. So we have had trouble addressing that, except for trash. We wrote regulations for that. People have been creating fences out of scrap and junk materials, and we're just tightening up that language for that. They've created barriers and screens attached scrap, junk, tarps to the porches, fence, houses. Just creating blight, but we can tighten up the language. And so that we're using this opportunity to address that. We propose to remove gravel and garden bricks or pavers as a parking surface, because there wasn't really clear-cut language on that. We see that a lot. People think like, well, I want to park in my yard. As long as I put down gravel or stones, I can do that. Not so. And then there's one that I wanted to address because Councilmember Hussein, you did email Raleigh about a question of land that was shown as industrial in the future land use map and then subsequently zoned industrial in the zoning ordinance. We wrote in specific language in there that would any lawfully constructed residential building from 1 to 6 units would have conforming status. So that would assist with sales, obtaining mortgage, getting insurance, as well as, heaven forbid, the destruction of that property. And if it was rebuilt, it would be allowed to be rebuilt. So I know there was some comments about staff overreach or maybe nefarious civil rights violations, or maybe eminent domain was thrown around. The comprehensive plan was written over 3 years. The form-based code was written 5 to 7 years, and it's been in effect for over 3 years. So there's been a plethora of public meetings, public hearings. We're not trying to take anyone's land. So we are trying to address that situation so that doesn't happen. I wouldn't be super in favor of rezoning it back to residential, because it's right for Sunset anyway. It's right next to a wastewater treatment plant. It doesn't make sense for it to be residential. So my hope is, in the future, maybe it transitions into industrial. The same with a section of Hazel and Cedar Street by the operations and maintenance hub of the city. There's a similar district that is residential, but it's in a floodplain surrounded by industrial. It just doesn't quite make sense. But again, we don't want to take anyone's property values or limit what they can do with their property. So that's where this one particular provision comes from. So that's just kind of an intro.
With that, Raleigh, do you have anything to add? Joan, anything you want to chime in on?
I don't think so. Andy's is Cottage Lane in the D1 district. Or is that?
It's actually an R5 technically, so it's a single family district.
Yeah, there was some conversation at a meeting of the shared use housing group. And where people were really familiar with Rivendell and the other cooperatives in town, and wondered if limiting those to multifamily districts might be somewhat restrictive. Cottage Lane is kind of a gem of the east side, and it's located within the neighborhood. And by the way, they're having an open house on Friday from 3 to 7, so come see it. So yes, there was consideration of requesting that the council look at being a little more inclusive in terms of where those could be located, both the co-ops and cottage developments.
I'll just add real quick also, if any council member wants to meet one-on-one with staff and with Raleigh, obviously, we'd be happy to facilitate that just to get in a deep dive.
Right.
But whatever your particular interests are in.
Yeah. So, Councilman Garza, there's a lot to digest here, right? And we don't have Councilman Brown with us today. And I think I want to take you up on the opportunity to sit down. Because before moving this out for a public hearing, I really believe that the committee should have a sound understanding of what's in front of us.
I was gonna,
Go ahead.
I was gonna ask, I see you have like some bullet points of what you wanted to talk about today. Is there any way you could give us like a high level overview of each one of those? So, I think it'd be a little easier to digest in all of this. And then if we want to get into it, obviously we have this too. Get into the full.
But my handouts are really what I just said. Those were the kind of the broad stuff. That one right in front of you to the right there, that table, that does discuss all of the changes. So you don't have to go through all 280 pages.
Page number, here's the section. Here's some of the language.
But
This is helpful. I appreciate it.
But I understand you might not understand like where that's coming from or what that means. So we'd be happy to get into that more.
Absolutely. Okay. So, go ahead.
And were you asking me if I need any more information about the
Oh, I just did.
committees?
Yeah, sure. If you want to share with us, that'd be great.
Yeah, about any of those five forms of shared use options?
Besides ADUs.
Besides ADUs, okay. I actually have nothing more to say.
All right, fantastic.
Until we get to ADUs.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I guess what I'm going to ask is that we take the opportunity over the next couple of weeks, obviously, pour over this. If you do want to, meet with and take him up on his offer between now and the next meeting, which is the 25th. Should be.
Yeah, I think it is.
25th, yes.
Certainly do that. We'll make sure that Jeff has the opportunity to bill himself for that too.
And it sounds like he may be in the car trouble.
Is that what's going on?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, yeah, and if we could have you, Andy, back on the 25th, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Raleigh, you look like you want to say something.
Nope. Just thinking.
Sure.
I'm out next week, so I won't be able to meet, but
Well, this is the 25th.
no, I'm saying if you want to meet privately.
Oh, I get what you're saying. Yeah, okay. Yeah, give me a couple of days to read through this and then I'll reach out. Okay? And I'm sure you'll hear from other community members as well. All right, that takes us to item D. Oh, yes, sorry, this is setting up of a public hearing on amending Part 12, Title 6, Chapter 1250, to include 1250.04.08 for ADUs or accessory dwelling units. Andy, might as well.
So this is, I won't say a companion piece to the zoning amendment, but we realized that we didn't really want to attach ADUs to the full document just because we would be the first community in the capital region to allow ADUs. Technically, East Lansing allows them, but it's a district that doesn't have any properties. So figure that out. But honestly, ADUs are the #1 request made to the Planning and Zoning Office. This dates back to just months following adoption in 2021. Out of 31 comments that we've received about the zoning ordinance, 17 have been for ADUs. And that doesn't include an uptick after articles were published in the City Pulse about it. So these were people,
And I'm sorry, so these, and I may have missed what you said because I was talking to Andrew.
Sorry about
Or hearing from you. So those are organic, like that's organic input?
Yes.
You weren't out soliciting for any particular?
Correct.
Okay, I got you.
And that ranges across the city, so it's not just one area.
Okay.
This is everywhere in the most kind of like suburban subdivisions of the south and north side, to more kind of dense east and central sides. And yeah, it doesn't include comments that came after the City Pulse articles or through Joan's work with the network, because we did have, there's another handful, a dozen or so, and then you saw in your packet, there's 20 or so letters as well. ADUs are detailed as a strategy in the comprehensive plan, but they were never codified. So there is basis in our master plan for them. Staff reviewed dozens of ordinance texts from Michigan. There's at least 20 other communities in Michigan that allow ADUs and across the country. So I think there's a perception that we maybe work closely with that shared housing network, or we took orders from them. That's not so. They made a lot of.
I'm not gonna lie, I made the charge. Absolutely.
Sure.
Okay. I appreciate the clarity.
Yeah, they were the most vocal cheerleaders, but like I said, there's been 17 other comments made for them.
Okay.
So they didn't chime in on policy whatsoever. We did our own research. We did our own kind of crafting of these regulations with the help of Office of the City Attorney. We did these independently. So those regulations, we are, before I get into those, before we've taken requests from all over the city, we were proposing that they be allowed in all residential districts rather than limiting them to certain areas. If council feels differently, we could talk that over. But we have regulations related to the minimum lot size. So just for that, we propose that any person who wants an ADU, they have to have at least 1.5 times the minimum lot size of that district. So say it's R1, that's a 5,000 square foot residential district, they would need at least 7,500 square feet. And we just want to guarantee that there's room to make room for the ADU, so to speak. I believe in that presentation that shows like 99% of R1 properties and the other residential properties would actually fit that requirement, but that doesn't take into account corner lots, lots with already a large house, or lots with a big garage, or that would already be over that maximum lot coverage that we propose as well. So that number would narrow down quite a bit. It isn't probably 99% of residential districts. We also have regulations for maximum height. We want to guarantee that if anyone did have an ADU, they wouldn't tower over their neighbor. It's 15 feet, which is the maximum height of an accessory structure like a garage. So they have the same height limit. Minimum and maximum ground floor area. So minimum being 400 square feet, which is our minimum for residential houses as well. But we are limiting the maximum ground floor area to that of the principal dwelling on the lot, not to exceed 1,000 square feet. So we don't want someone with a small house and then a giant ADU that throws off the built environment. We did take a lot of look at these setbacks from property line as well as other structures. We are proposing 10 feet, which meets fire code. So that's where that 10 feet came from, as well as maximum lot coverage of the rear yard and total lot coverage, pretty close to what already exists. So there's not going to be, we're not trying to cramp or allow the cramping of new dwellings on lots where they might not fit. We're trying to take a balanced approach, not being overly restrictive, but also guarantee that, if we do allow these, that they just won't be built because we're too restrictive. So we did really push for a balanced approach.
Good question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm looking at these pictures, and please help me understand, are these just different examples? I mean, if the property allows it, are you able to put like multiple ADUs?
No, sir.
Okay,
So yeah, that graphic is just a rendering showing that they would have to be attached. So you couldn't we're not proposing people doing additions onto their house, creating a duplex, so to speak. They would have to be detached or attached to the garage unit in the back.
so what I'm asking though, like if the lot size is rather large, are they able, does this allow multiple ADUs? No, okay.
So yeah, I was just trying to gear into that. Yeah, the renderings are just for illustrative purposes, but yeah, we're limiting to one ADU per single family lot with a established single family. So if they had like a duplex in a single family district, like grandfathered in from way back when, they won't be allowed an ADU because they already have 2 units.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it's just established single family.
Now, does this increase the property tax on that lot?
That's
What would it do to the adjacent lot's property value?
I would make the assumption, yes. Adding more to a property could cause the assessor to determine that value has since increased. Yes, that would be my guess.
I'm sorry.
I'll go ahead and speak to it just because it would require permitting and such. And so then the city would be made aware of it. Once it's complete, the assessor would have to go out, reassess. It would increase value. The same as adding a bathroom to an existing house would increase the value. Whether that affects neighboring properties is really going to only matter if everybody does it in the same equalization district, and then equalization lifts or lowers the tide some amount, but that's not going to be a big shift. So because property values are capped otherwise, so you're not going to see a big shift on neighboring, like adjoining properties if this person builds an ADU in their backyard. But the person that built the ADU would certainly see an increase in taxes.
What did we use? Did we take from somebody? I mean, who's the model city? Anybody?
No one. We looked at.
I do know that. I've talked to some folks from other cities, and whether it be Traverse City, whether it be Grand Rapids, whether it be, you're correct. They allow for them, but they also are restricting the number based on, it might be 10 per year, it might be 15 per year. They might actually have to have an SLU approved through their legislative body. So there's even concern in those communities that there's going to be this explosion, right, of ADU. So there's nothing proposed like that in here, right?
Correct. So, yeah, I reviewed a ton, but there wasn't anyone who were like, oh, I really liked X community. So I looked at, 99% of what they proposed. To that comment, we also weren't proposing a owner occupied requirement. So theoretically, both could be rentals. We also weren't doing a short-term rental ban as well. So somebody could turn it into an Airbnb if they wanted. We weren't setting that restriction. If council feels otherwise, we could look at that and we would be amenable to that. We were just, again, looking at how do we have a balanced approach without being super restrictive. And for that cap, these are going to cost $100,000, $150,000 that people are interested in them. They don't really understand what it will actually take to build them. So even the ones that do have caps, mostly the vacation communities have hit that cap. But other communities like Grand Rapids, I think, had one when they first started out. They've gotten progressive.
Of the 20 cities in Michigan that have approved ADUs. And I think Ann Arbor was the first back in 2016, but the experience of those that we talked to was that even though when they first established or allowed ADUs, they were fairly strictly monitored. And but what they had found is that there was less and less need for being so stringent, and had steadily increased the ease with which that people could build in their own backyards. we had a conversation with the deputy director of planning of Grand Rapids, and he, talked about the fact that that the growth of ADUs was slower than they anticipated because of cost, unanticipated costs, greater costs than people had thought it would involve. But most, all of the cities whose staff we talked to had no regrets, felt that it was a good move, it was a good strategy for, again, gently thickening, the neighborhoods and, helping out the housing crisis. We also met with, on a couple of occasions, and you received a letter from Paula Cunningham of the Michigan AARP. And AARP nationally is probably the largest champion of ADUs. And the reason is that they see it as an income stream they see a lot of seniors wanting to build an ADU that would house a caregiver, perhaps house some of their children, and then over time be a space that they could move into themselves while they rented out the big house in the front. But it had lots of economic benefits for seniors, and those are a lot of the people in the cities in Michigan that are exploring building an ADU in their yard. So just an FYI.
No, I appreciate it. All right, fantastic. So it's a companion piece. I'm certainly not movable, but to me, it would make sense to, move this at the same time in terms of the public hearing that we move item C. But again, if you have other thoughts.
I agree with you, and I guess I just have another question, sorry.
Go for it.
So regarding the short-term rentals, have you guys taken this idea out to like the different neighborhood groups and talked to them? Because I definitely hear quite a bit of complaints about the Airbnbs in the neighborhoods of, parties and, people congesting up the streets because there's more people there than they should be. And I would hate to sign off on something without, getting the general input from the neighborhoods.
We haven't done that outreach, so we could take that this time that this allows to do that. We'd be happy to do that.
What would that look like?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. Beyond attending those meetings, we could think of more interactive ways or more productive ways besides just attending their meetings. Something, because not everyone attends those meetings.
Right.
So if you're involved in the neighborhood, you'll hear about it, but that leaves out 99% of the neighborhood.
True.
So we can explore different ways of getting that information out.
All right. So what do you think?
Well, I think we say maybe try to digest a little bit more of this, hopefully get some input from the public and then potentially take it out of committee after we have a little bit more time to digest this, excuse me.
Sounds good to me. That takes us to, so you guys understand where we're at?
Yes.
Okay. So that takes us to item E, discussion on budget priorities fiscal year 2025, 2026. Have you had an opportunity to look at these?
Yeah, I did, and I don't have anything additional to add at this point.
So we have, just so you know, we have a couple questions out, as an example, LEBC, to find out, in terms of positions that were funded this fiscal year. Are these boxes that we can check off, or do these need to remain on there? And if not, right, if we haven't necessarily checked the boxes on these, are these items we want to keep on there? So I'm hoping that we get some answers soon. Matter of fact, I saw a couple of emails come in, so we might have some answers.
Okay.
But what I would say is that on that 25th is obviously the last day we have at this in committee. So if there's anything that you want to see as a budget priority come out of this committee, just make sure you have that ready for that meeting. I should say before.
Yeah, definitely have.
Okay.
Sherry or Renee put something together for us.
Fantastic. And even, you look at item 4, there's aspects of that.
Here, Jones.
I don't know if you remember, but thank you.
Thank you.
We had Emily with us, and we had asked her to do some of that work actually. And it just never happened. So maybe with internal auditor, we have the saddle now, maybe we can get some of that done. So, all right. Any other business before the body?
Not for me.
Same. We are adjourned. Andy, I'll call you